Thank you, Leslie. Hello, everyone. Associate Professor in NC State. My name is Mahmoud Sharara. I will talk to you today about training development for anaerobic digesters on farm. Okay. Um, I have a problem. I have a lot of slides. Poor planning, but you have the spoiler here. We developed the training and we rolled it out. So I'll get you to kind of a little bit of an introduction of why we needed it, North Carolina and the landscape for digesters, and how the need arise, and then what we've done to develop, what we've learned, and what we're continuing to do. Okay. With that, again, it's an extension talk for training. So we start to commit everybody on this base, digesters, how they work. It's a biological systems, fermentation, anaerobic. Different feedstocks can enter. You have two streams, biogas, digestate. Biogas is energy carrier. You can use it for heat, energy, and so on. Digestate is the nutrient-rich fraction. Again, this is my graphic. It's, EPA. And we use this formula. Organic residue plus bacteria gives us biogas and digestate. Okay? Probably if you're reading the literature or keeping up with the news, the uptake has been growing steadily over the last 20 plus years for on-farm digesters. Again, that was a report from the Economic Research Services, USDA, 2 years ago. And you can see continuous growth on farms. So that is a big more and more relevant technology. And the EPA STAR program has a kind of a mapping GIS object that allows you to see where are the farm digesters across the country. They do a good job color coding sizes to show you the size of the digesters. And they show up where you expect them to. Dairy in the system, California, Idaho here. Hogs where they are, Missouri, North Carolina, and some in Oklahoma and out in the West as well. And I want to focus here on North Carolina. So again, according to the database, there's 15 operating digesters in North Carolina. What I want to tell you is we actually have a much larger number today, about 3 times that number and growing. So that growth happened over a very short amount of time, which is part of the drivers for our need. Historically, and again, that word was up there showing you that digesters were permitted as an individual permit. So the permitting becomes relevant here, because this is how essentially farmers are putting them on farms. I'm giving you an example of two digesters that you see in North Carolina. Those were built in the early 2000s. Again, the financial model was federal, state funding, a lot of support from the local utility to meet renewable goals. And they were individually permitted, which means they have to come up with their own design and get it approved, kind of run it through the approval process, which is time commitment, a significant requirement there. A big change happened, I think, 2017, 2018 in North Carolina digesters, or ADs in particular, with the model for digesters to RNG. Essentially, instead of using the energy to plug into a utility or a co-op, you're actually creating a renewable natural gas that is being injected to the pipeline. We do not have a compressed natural gas. We only create the renewable natural gas that is directly injected into pipelines. So that the first systems that came in line came online in 2018 was an aggregation of 5 swine operations, the gas and injecting it. And it was a big deal, and a lot of attention came into that industry and that model. Coincided with Smithfield Foods, which is the largest integrator responsible for more than 80% of the pigs growing in made commitments related to greenhouse gas emission reductions and sustainability goals, and formed some joint ventures with the utility companies or companies, essentially to streamline the process of building digesters on farms in the state. Okay, everything is teed up to have that exponential growth in the technology. What continued to be sort of the bottleneck, so to speak, is the permitting process. The companies settled on a configuration for digesters, which is the covered lagoon in ground, no heating, very similar to California and digesters. And most of the innovation happens in the gas cleanup to RNG quality. So with that, the economic incentive primarily in North Carolina is that we have a renewable portfolio standards, historically put into law in 2007, and has specific carve-outs for swine and poultry energy. which is unique for North Carolina. But historically, we were not able to meet these carve-outs. Simply the technology, the cost, we're not able to meet this. The utilities has consistently pushed these commitments into the future until that point where the RNG technology lined up with this carve-outs, and they were able to start rolling that out. Again, the permitting process was one of the bottlenecks. But we started to see a lot of that uptake happening around the North Carolina. So today we have about 58 digesters, roughly, in various stages, and I'll show you where they are. Obviously, you can see a cluster here. This is where most of the pig production in North Carolina is located in the coastal plains, southeastern part of the state. And this is according to the October last year. This is the status of the applications. So they actually started doing quarterly reports, permitting and in review, permitted and active, and only two inactive. So there is a pipeline of permitting digesters coming in line continuously. To essentially streamline this process, I'm calling it cookie cutter, essentially because it's very similar the way digesters are being built. A general permit was put forward, which basically makes sure the process is very easily and streamlined to permit these systems and bring them online. That became active in 2022. So that's about 3 years ago. And these are the components that you would expect to see in one of these general permits. You know, operator maintenance requirements, reporting, inspection, and penalties, like any permit in any other state. And some appendices for reporting. All of that is nice, you know, technology and financial incentives and regulatory agencies. But in true fashion, a lot of litigations and pushback started to come out related to concerns about the technology. And in North Carolina in particular, around animal agriculture, there's a history, a lot of issues related to relations and inherited perceptions. So that transferred to the digester. So one of the things we inherited is a litigation around digesters and the permitting process in the first place. And a lot of concerns started to come out related to community and environmental impacts of the digesters, and essentially a negative perception. So a lot of that we started to receive from the university, all of the state agencies related to concern and scrutiny about what are the health impacts, what are the quality. Internally, we do understand as the systems are being built without the growers or the producers are fully aware of all the pinch points and potential risks. We started to see that, well, we need to make sure everybody understands fully what are the benefits, what the technology can and cannot do. Because again, false promises around digesters can be can do a disservice to the adoption. Also, impacts on other aspects of the farm. What will change? And there are some changes. And then we, as you might imagine, a rapid adoption rate with in knowledge that can create a bad outcome, and any bad incident can really based around technology around. So all of these kind of conditions, you can imagine that knowledge and training development is required. A lot of the state agencies, and I'm just going over a list here, between the Department of Environmental Quality, takes over the responsibility for oversight and inspection, Environmental Commission, Management Commission, again, stakeholders, putting rules adoption, a deliberative body in the state. We have a certification commission that essentially certifies operators, whether they are in a wastewater treatment or on an animal operation. They are one of these bodies that essentially started to receive concerns and discuss this in their activities. So through all of these, which are interagency bodies in North Carolina, we started to see that there is a need. So we received the charge to develop and to deliver that training. And our charge was specifically to make sure that the operation of digesters is safe to individuals on farm as well as communities, to be protective of air and water quality, and the additional one is economically sustainable. Again, that is not a DEQ mandate, but this is from our understanding. This is how a farm can live and die. So our team, myself and colleagues from NC State, but also DEQ collaborators, and they are the co-authors on the title, and there's a collective expertise that we have among the group, and we turned around to create this process to essentially develop our learning outcomes. Essentially, talk to everybody, what is the missing, what do you need to know, develop learning objectives or need to knows, get feedback, submit them for approval by the commission before we can develop the training to go towards these goals. Again, very kind of systematic approach, but common to all the training programs. We aggregated our need to knows into these modules. So basics of a 101, information about gas digester, operation and maintenance, an important point related to preparing for which is specific to hurricane flooding issues that we see, protecting environmental quality and safety, public safety, and security, which are difficult to bring all of these together. We reach out to individuals in different institutes, the community here for the LPLC, a lot of training material. In addition, UW-Madison, State. Also, the American Biogas Council has a training, but it's targeted towards a different type of digesters, and it's more industrial, large-scale digester type compared to what we are seeing for an on-farm operation. Also, Smithfield Foods themselves have developed internal in-house material that they were prepared with to incorporate or take from it what is useful for our purposes. We also recognize that we have some gaps in the training. In terms of what it looks like on the farm today. So we actually coordinated some tours with farms in North Carolina, compiled pictures, footage, and media material, and I'll share some of them, and we started building that knowledge base. So in addition to the curriculum, the 3-hour training for these modules, we actually started to kind of aggregate this material and started the rollout with extension agents, with animal feeding operation inspectors twice at different stops along the way. We made sure also we had opportunity to discuss and get feedback. What is missing, what we need to include. So that was very valuable to improve the content every time before we started rolling out last winter. And we've learned a lot of variability of what's out there. Different systems installed, expectations of the farmers are different involvement by the third parties that install these systems. And we found we ourselves have gaps in knowledge on the financial models and the long-term performance. They have not been operating for long enough time for us to provide robust recommendation on the long-term when they need to clean it up. Also, the case studies on failure and safety are very protected and not widely shared, which actually is a disservice for us to learn from these mistakes. So that's an important thing we found. Again, I'm sharing here some of the positive feedback we've received. An important point that we've learned is that communicating about hazard and risk sometimes can scare people off. It's very important to make sure to communicate that hazards exist around us. The more we plan for them, the more we reduce risk. So this was a very valuable point. We try to make sure continuous contact is there. We also, one important feedback was we needed all these common questions to be answered. So what we've done is we compiled all the questions we received during the rollout training. We brought a lot of experts from regulation, from companies. We sat them together, invited, again, the attendees for Zoom, got them answered, compiled them and typed them up. Everybody approved them, and we had it published as a continuously growing, frequently asked question list that are being answered. So that becomes kind of a living document to help with the answering. And it was picked up by a couple of trade magazines, so that kind of increased the visibility of what's being done here in North Carolina. And we kind of built this kind of page knowledge base for a lot of what we're developing. To know everything you need to know about digesters in North Carolina. So yeah, adoption is growing. Financial and measurement models are just evolving, and we saw a gap in training. We believe we've met with this training, and it is continuously growing. I look to this group for feedback, inputs, and hopefully collaboration. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge a lot of the support we got along the way. Take any questions.